Okay, let's unpack this. We often talk about companies that, try to do one thing perfectly. The artisans.
Right, the boutique studios.
Exactly. The studios that spend like 7 years polishing the reflection in a single puddle in a game. But what happens when a company decides to be, well, a machine? A literal factory of ideas?
It is a really interesting distinction to make, and today we're looking at a company that put that entire ambition right there in their name, Idea Factory.
Idea Factory Holdings Co., LTD, yeah. And looking at the stack of sources we have today, which is, it's largely built around this really comprehensive breakdown of their history, their subsidiaries, and this absolutely massive, almost overwhelming list of games they've released.
Yeah.
It feels like we're looking at a survivor.
A survivor is definitely the right word. They were founded in 1994 in the video game industry. Just surviving for over 30 years is, that's incredibly rare.
It's an eternity.
It is. But surviving by constantly, shifting your entire identity, that's something else entirely. It's even rarer.
It's wild. We're going to see them go from these really gritty, hardcore strategy games for the PlayStation 1.
Mm-hmm.
The kinds of games that basically required a spreadsheet to understand,
Yeah.
to becoming the absolute dominant force in romance games for women, to then making games about, like, anime consoles fighting each other. It's a journey that, on paper, it just doesn't make any sense.
But it creates this fascinating narrative arc. And the mission for this deep dive is to really try and understand that evolution. How does a company that was founded by refugees from a studio like Data East, how do they evolve into what Idea Factory is today? Because they aren't just a game developer. They're, like you said, a case study in agility.
And for you listening, even if you've never played a single one of their games, and let's be honest, some of them are incredibly, incredibly niche, this is a business story at its core.
Mm-hmm.
It's about finding a niche, exploiting it until the wheels fall off, and then finding a completely different niche just to keep the lights on. It's about survival.
Precisely. It's all about that factory metaphor. They don't just have ideas. They seem to industrialize them. They iterate. They reuse assets when they can. They build these entire ecosystems out of seemingly nothing.
So let's start at the very beginning, the birth of the factory, October 26, 1994.
Right. Headquarters in Kibashi, Chush, Tokyo. It sounds like a pretty humble beginning.
It does. The source material mentions the key figures leading the charge today. Shingo Kawana as chairman and Yoshiteru Sato as president. But the origin story, it really hinges on where these people came from. The source notes the company was founded by former employees of Data East.
And that detail is crucial. You really can't understand the DNA of Idea Factory without looking at Data East. For those who might not know, Data East was a major, major player in the arcade era.
Right.
They made very distinct, often quirky, sometimes just plain weird action games. Burger Time. Bad dudes. Karnoff.
Bad dudes. No way. Are you a bad enough dude to save the president? That's the same Data East.
The very same. They had this reputation for games that were, maybe a little rough around the edges, but they had immense personality. They were memorable.
They really were.
But by the mid-90s, the whole industry was changing so rapidly. The arcade scene was beginning its slow, painful decline. The home console market, on the other hand, was just exploding. The PlayStation 1 was about to launch in Japan in December of '94.
So you have this group of developers, and they're leaving an established giant like Data East right on the cusp of the 3D revolution. That feels like a massive gamble.
That's huge.
It's like they're leaving a sinking ship, maybe, but they're jumping onto a tiny raft in the middle of a hurricane.
Massive gamble, yeah. But it also suggests they wanted creative control, right? When you look at Data East's output, it was very arcade-centric. It was all about quick thrill.
Quarter munchers.
Exactly, quarter munchers. Idea Factory, from the very, very start, seemed to pivot towards something deeper, something with more staying power. They wanted to make games you could really get lost in for hours. Console gaming, role-playing games, strategy.
And they didn't just set up a single studio and call it a day. Looking at the corporate structure that's provided in the source, Idea Factory isn't just one room where people are making games. It's a holding company.
Yes, and that structure is absolutely key to their survival. It's a very mature business approach for what is, at its heart, a creative field. They've diversified their risk by creating these specialized subsidiaries.
Okay, so walk me through them.
Well, you have Compile Heart, which is often the one associated with their more traditional RPGs, especially the Neptunia series. You have Design Factory, which is a bit more behind the scenes. And then perhaps most significantly, you have Otomate.
Right, Otomate. We are going to spend a lot of time on Otomate later because that list of games in the source is just staggering. But that's their female-oriented branch, correct?
That's the one. It is the engine that drove their growth for probably an entire decade. And then more recently, you have Idea Factory International, which is their bridge to the West.
Based in California.
Right. And a relatively new addition from 2022 called Altergear.
It's like an octopus. It's got all these tentacles in every specific nerd niche you can imagine. If one tentacle gets cut off, the others just keep feeding the beast.
That is a very fair analogy. Instead of trying to make one single game that appeals to absolutely everyone, the blockbuster strategy, they created these divisions to make very specific games for very specific groups of people.
So let's rewind to the mid-90s. They've just left Data East. They've got their office in Tokyo. The PlayStation is about to change everything.
Yeah.
What is the first thing that comes off the assembly line?
Well, looking at the game's published list in our source, the very first title that appears is Spectral Tower in 1996 for the PlayStation.
Spectral Tower. Okay, that sounds ominous. It definitely doesn't sound like a game where you jump on turtles.
No, it sets the tone perfectly for their early years. It was a dungeon crawler, first person, very difficult, very dense. And then in 1997, you get Spectral Force.
And this kicks off what I'm calling the Spectral and Chaos era. I'm just looking at this list.
Yeah.
And the sheer volume of titles with the word Spectral or Chaos in them is, it's kind of hilarious.
It is relentless. Between 1996 and roughly 2005, they were building a brand. You have Spectral Force 2, Ayan Naru Kiseki in 1998. You have Spectral Force, Lovely Wickedness in 1999.
Okay, Lovely Wickedness is a great subtitle, by the way.
It is.
It sounds like a goth band from the late 90s or something.
It's very evocative of that era. And then on the other side of the coin, you have the Chaos branding. Generation of Chaos in 2001, Kingdom of Chaos, Field of Chaos. It just keeps going.
It feels like they found a fantasy setting they really liked and just decided to live there for a decade. But let's talk about the gameplay for a second. Because looking at screenshots of something like Spectral Force or Generation of Chaos, this isn't Final Fantasy. You aren't just, walking around a world map fighting goblins in random battles.
No, not at all. These are strategy RPGs or SRPGs. Grand strategy, even. Think of it as a mix of a game like Risk, maybe a bit of Civilization, and then a classic Japanese RPG.
Okay.
You choose a nation from, dozens of options. You have generals, each with their own stats and special moves. You have to manage your borders, fortify your castles, recruit troops, and even engage in diplomacy with the other kingdoms. And then when a battle actually happens, it shifts to a tactical map.
So it's basically a spreadsheet with dragons.
In the best possible way, yes. It appeals to a very, very specific type of brain, the type of player who loves maximizing stats and organizing armies and looking at maps.
And they just kept pumping these out. The market was there for it, clearly.
They did. And in gaming circles, this whole interconnected series is often referred to as the Neverland universe. The source material actually lists games like Neverland Senki Zero and later on, Neverland Card Battles.
Oh, I see that. Neverland Card Battles on the PSP much later on. So all these Spectral and Chaos games, they're all connected. They take place in the same world.
For the most part, yes. They were building this huge, interconnected world with a long history. And this is really interesting from a business perspective. If you are a small studio in the 90s, you don't have the budget for Final Fantasy level graphics. You can't compete on spectacle.
Yeah.
So how do you hook players and keep them coming back?
I don't know how.
You hook them with lore, you hook them with continuity. If you played Spectral Force, you might see a character named Jadoo. Then, 3 years later, in Generation of Chaos, Jadoo is back, but maybe now he's an older king or a legendary villain.
I see.
If you've played the previous games, you feel rewarded. You get the reference. You feel like you're part of a secret club that understands the deep history of this world.
That's really smart. It creates a sticky ecosystem. You're not just buying a game, you're buying another piece of the puzzle. It's basically the Marvel Cinematic Universe model, but built on a shoestring budget in 1998.
That's the perfect way to put it. And look at the platform loyalty here during this era. The list is just dominated by the original PlayStation and then seamlessly the PlayStation 2. They found where that hardcore RPG audience was living, and they just set up shop and refused to leave.
I did notice an odd one in the list, though, from 1998. Spectral Force. Era Corinne. The system listed is mobile phone.
That stood out to me as well. 1998 is incredibly early for mobile gaming, especially in Japan. This was well before smartphones. This would have been on those early i-mode-style distinct Japanese feature phones.
Wow. So even while they were deep in this console strategy RPG grind, they were willing to experiment. They were dipping a toe into mobile way, way before it's cool.
It speaks to that factory mindset again. Try everything. If the brand is strong, see if it works on a tiny phone screen. They were likely looking at the Japanese commuter culture and thinking, if we can get them to play our game for 5 minutes on the train to work, that's a win.
It's an interesting little footnote in their history.
Yeah.
So, okay, we have this first decade. It's gritty. It's strategy heavy. It's all demons and knights and kingdoms at war. And then something shifts.
A seismic shift, really. A complete change in direction.
We get to section 3 of our outline, the Otomate revolution. And this is where things get really interesting for me.
This is arguably the single most important pivot in the company's entire history. I'm not sure we would even be talking about them today if they hadn't done this.
For those listening who might not know, let's define this clearly. What is Otomate?
Otomate is the brand name for their division that produces otome games. Otome literally translates to maiden. In gaming terms, these are story-driven games, usually visual novels, aimed specifically at a female audience. The gameplay goal is usually to pursue a relationship and romance one of several male characters.
So we go from Generation of Chaos, which sounds like a heavy metal album cover, and involves managing tax rates for a goblin army, to romance games for women. That is a hard left turn.
It is. But if you look at the Otomate games sublist in our source, you see that they didn't just dabble in this. They didn't just release one game to see what would happen. They absolutely flooded the market.
The list is huge. I'm scrolling through it right now, and it just keeps going. Why did they do this? Was the strategy market just dying out?
It was a few things. By the mid-2000s, yeah, the spectral formula was getting a little stale. Development costs on the next generation of consoles, the PS3, were skyrocketing. But more importantly, Idea Factory identified a massively underserved market.
Women.
Exactly. In the mid-2000s, video games were still largely marketed almost exclusively toward men and boys. There were very, very few high-quality, narrative-rich games specifically for women on consoles. Idea Factory looked at that huge void and said, we can fill that.
It's the classic blue ocean strategy, right? Everyone else is fighting over the teenage boys in this bloody red ocean of competition. Let's go over here where there is no one.
That's it, exactly. And because these were visual novels, they didn't require complex 3D physics engines or massive open worlds. They relied on beautiful 2D art, excellent voice acting, and most importantly, good writing. It was incredibly cost-effective to produce them.
So they could make a lot of them for cheap.
And test the waters with different themes and genres within that one umbrella.
Let's look at some of the heavy hitters here, because some of these names are absolutely legendary in that community.
The biggest one, without a doubt, has to be Hakuuki. It first appears on the list as Hakuuki Shinsengumi Kitan in 2008.
And the Shinsengumi part refers to that famous sort of samurai police force in 19th century Japan, right?
Correct. It's a historical fantasy. You play as a young woman who gets entangled with these famous historical swordsmen, Hijikata Toshizo, Okita Tsuji, who are, of course, all drawn to be incredibly attractive. But Idea Factory added a twist. They added vampires.
Wait, what? Vampires?
Oh.
In 1860s Kyoto.
Well, essentially. In the game, they're called Furies, or Rasetsu. The samurai drink this special medicine, the water of life, to get stronger and heal their wounds, but it has a side effect. It turns them into these bloodthirsty, white-haired berserkers, and it slowly drains their life force.
So every romance is basically a tragedy waiting to happen. You fall in love with a guy who's doomed.
And that is the key. Otome games aren't always just about happily ever after. They are often about melodrama, sacrifice, and tragic romance. Hakuuki hit that tone perfectly. It resonated so deeply that it spawned multiple anime series, stage plays, movies. It became a huge media franchise.
Naturally. And looking at the list, Hakuuki isn't a one-and-done title. I see Hakuuki Zusuroku, Hakuuki Ramiroku, Hakuuki Sweet School Life.
Wait a minute, Sweet School Life?
Yes, this is a common trope in anime and Japanese games. After you put the characters through a grueling, tragic, bloody war story, you release a non-canon spin-off where they are all just students and teachers in a modern Japanese high school.
That is whiplash. From tragic samurai vampires to the school festival. It's pure fan service. It allows the fans who fell in love with these characters to see them happy and doing mundane things like planning for the cultural festival. It shows the incredible power of the IP. Once the audience loved these characters, they would follow them anywhere, even to high school algebra class.
That's amazing. There's another title that pops up a lot here in the list, Amnesia.
Yes, a huge one. Amnesia, later Amnesia Crowd, Amnesia World, Amnesia.
Memories.
I love the title. It's so direct. It implies mystery right off the bat.
It does. And the premise is exactly that. The protagonist wakes up on August 1st with no memory of her life, her job, her friends, nothing. She has a little spirit guide named Orion that only she can see, and she has to navigate her relationships with these 5 men who all claim to be her boyfriend, but she doesn't know who she can trust.
That sounds more like a psychological thriller than a romance game. It blends the two genres brilliantly. In some of the story routes, if you make the wrong choice, the love interest might actually turn out to be dangerous or even kill you. It adds this layer of genuine suspense and paranoia to the whole experience. It proved that autumn games could be dark, psychological, and really intense.
And speaking of dark,
Yeah.
we have to mention the Diabolic Lovers series.
Ah, yes. Which is, well, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's about a group of vampire brothers, but not the noble, tragic vampires of Hakuki.
No, what kind of vampires are we talking about?
Diabolic Lovers caters to a much, much darker fantasy. The love interests are all sadists. They are emotionally and verbally abusive. It's what's known as a do-s, or sadism-focused game.
That seems risky and really controversial.
It was incredibly controversial, but it was also massive. Titles in the source, like Diabolic Lovers, More Blood, and Vanded Carnival, show that it found a huge audience. It tapped into the bad boy trope and just dialed it up to 11, or maybe 100.
It's just impressive how they segmented the market. They have the historical samurai niche, the psychological mystery niche, the sadistic vampire niche, all within the broader romance genre. They essentially built a buffet for every possible taste.
And notice the hardware progression in this section. This is really fascinating to me if you look at it from a business analysis perspective.
What do you see? Walk me through it.
Okay, so the Otomate list starts on the PlayStation 2, around 2005 to 2010. But right around 2008, there is an aggressive, very sudden shift to the PSP, the PlayStation Portable.
Oh, right. Yeah, the list is suddenly all PSP, and then later on it's all PS Vita.
Exactly. While the rest of the gaming world was moving to high-definition home consoles like the PS3 and the Xbox 360, the auto market moved in the complete opposite direction. It went to handhelds.
Why do you think that is? I would assume you'd want to see the handsome samurai on your big screen TV.
Think about the nature of the game, though. It's a visual novel. It's basically like reading an interactive book. It's a very intimate, personal experience. You don't necessarily want to play a romance game on the big 50-inch TV in the living room with your family walking by.
Hey, Mom, just dating a vampire who keeps insulting me, don't mind me.
Exactly. You want to play it in your bedroom, or on the train during your commute, or in a cafe, ideally somewhere private. Handhelds offered that privacy and portability that was perfect for the genre.
That makes total sense. And the PSP and Vita were perfect for that kind of experience.
And Idea Factory recognized that immediately. They became one of the biggest supporters of the PS Vita long after other major developers had completely abandoned it. The source shows them releasing games on the Vita well into 2016 and 2017.
So they basically kept that handheld alive for their specific audience. That's a kind of loyalty you don't see often.
It's symbiotic, right? The audience bought the hardware specifically for the Otomate games, and the company kept supplying them with a steady stream of new titles. They built their own ecosystem on that device.
Okay, so we've got the strategy RPG roots, and we've got this massive romance empire they built.
Looking at section 4 of our outline, there's another whole side to this factory, the collaborations.
Yes. The games developed section of the source lists other developers alongside Idea Factory, and this is where things get really meta.
We have to talk about the Compile Heart connection and, of course, Hyperdimension Neptunia.
This series started around 2010, developed with their internal studio Compile Heart, but also in collaboration with Nippon Ichi Software and Gust.
The source lists those names.
Yeah.
For people who don't follow the nitty-gritty of Japanese RPGs, who are these guys?
Okay, so Nippon Ichi is famous for the Disgaea series, these incredibly over-the-top strategy games where you can level up to level 99999 and do billions of points of damage.
Right.
And Gust is famous for the Atelier series, these very charming, cozy games about alchemy and crafting. Putting them together with Idea Factory is like, well, the outline calls it the Avengers of niche RPGs, and that's not far off.
That's a great way to put it. It's a niche crossover event. And the game itself, Hyperdimension Neptunia, is a full-blown satire of the video game industry. The entire setting is a world called Game Industry.
Game Industry. Okay, real subtle there.
The main characters are literal anthropomorphic personifications of game consoles.
Wait, really? Like human versions of consoles?
Yes. The protagonist, Neptune, represents a fictional Sega console that never came out. Noir represents the PlayStation, blank represents Nintendo, vert represents the Xbox. And they are goddesses fighting each other in a literal console war.
That is the most idea factory thing I have ever heard. It's so self-referential. It's a snake eating its own tail, but the snake is an anime girl.
It is. And it resonated. It became a massive franchise for them. The source lists Hyperdimension Neptunia MK2, Victory, Megadimension Neptunia 7th. It became a third pillar of their business, right alongside Otomate and their older strategy games.
Why do you think this worked? On the surface, it sounds like a joke that would get old in about 5 minutes.
It worked because it embraced the mo culture of the time, cute anime girls doing cute things, but it wrapped it in this very specific, very nerdy gamer humor. The characters would break the fourth wall constantly. They would complain about grinding for experience points. They would make inside jokes about piracy or frame rates or game bugs.
So they were laughing with their audience, not at them.
Exactly. It made the player feel smart for getting all the references. It was a game for people who truly loved video games and the culture around them.
I also see some other crossover games here in the source. Cross Edge from 2008 and Trinity Universe from 2010.
Yeah, these are what you'd call festival games. They are pure fan service. They take characters from Idea Factory games, from Nippon Ichi games, sometimes from Capcom or Namco Bandai games, and just throw them all into one big RPG. It's an excuse to see all your favorites interact. What if my favorite character from Game A fought the villain from Game B?
It's literally playing with your action figures.
That's exactly what it is, and it reinforces that community feeling. If you are a fan of these niche Japanese games, Idea Factory is telling you, we see you. We are all in this weird little club together.
Before we move on from this section, I have to ask you about two specific titles that are listed here because the names are just incredible. First one, Sorcery Saga, Curse of the Great Curry God.
Yes. Released on the PS Vita, it's a dungeon crawler, a roguelike game, but the central theme is making curry.
Making curries.
Yes. You are a young sorceress, and you are fighting your way through dungeons filled with angry ingredients to find the legendary spices to make the ultimate curry to save your friend's curry restaurant.
I love it. It takes a very serious, often punishing genre, the roguelike, and just makes it completely ridiculous. And then there's this one, which I might struggle to say. Trillion, 1 billion, God of Destruction.
Yes. The number 1 trillion is literally in the title.
Why? What does that even mean?
The premise of the game is that the final boss, the God of Destruction, has 1 trillion hit points.
Get out. 1 trillion. As in a 1 followed by 12 zeros.
1 trillion, and your job is to whittle it down. You train a character, you send them to fight the boss, they do some damage, and then they inevitably die a heroic death. But their skills and power are passed on to the next character you train. It's a game about sacrifice and generational attrition.
That is such a bold, almost hostile design choice. It's terrifying.
It's an absurd mechanic, but it grabs your attention immediately, doesn't it? It stands out on a store shelf. God of Destruction sounds generic. 1 trillion HP God of Destruction sounds like a personal challenge.
It really does. It sounds impossible.
And that is the Idea Factory way. They aren't afraid to be weird. They know they can't compete with Final Fantasy on graphics or budget, so they compete on, wait, they did what? They compete on concept.
So they've conquered Japan with strategy RPGs and a massive otome game empire. But the world is a big place. Section 5 of our outline covers their expansion to the west.
This is a relatively recent development in the grand scheme of their 30-year history. Idea Factory International was established on September 30th, 2013.
And they set it up in California, right in the heart of the American games industry.
Correct.
Why does this matter so much? Before 2013, how were we in the West getting these games?
Usually through third-party publishers. Companies like NIS America or Axis Games or Atlas USA would license a title like Hakuki or Spectral Force, handle the translation and localization themselves, and then publish it.
So Idea Factory was getting paid, but they weren't really controlling the message or the distribution.
Exactly. They were getting a licensing fee, which is nice, but the Western publisher was taking a big cut of the profits and making all the decisions about marketing and release dates. By opening their own branch in California, they signaled a new level of confidence. They were basically saying, we know we have an audience in the West, and we want to sell to them directly.
It cuts out the middleman.
It cuts out the middleman, and it allows them to control their own destiny in the global market. They can decide exactly which games to localize and when. They can interact with their own fans. It was a real maturing moment for the company. They realized that niche in Japan plus niche in America plus niche in Europe actually equals a pretty decent-sized global market.
But then we get a curveball. The source mentions a 2022 announcement, a whole new division called Altergear.
This one is fascinating to me. The source says Altergear is a division focused on visual novel titles aimed at a male audience.
Wait a second. So they spent 15 years perfecting the art of the visual novel for women with Otomate. They built an entire empire on it. And now they are circling all the way back to men.
It certainly seems so.
Why would they do that? Is the otome market slowing down or something?
That's just speculation, but it could be a number of things. It could be that they feel the otome market is saturated largely by their own products. They've released so many games that maybe the market is getting a bit tired. Or perhaps they see a resurgence in interest for male-oriented visual novels on consoles and want to apply what they've learned.
It just goes to show that they are still iterating, even after 30 years. They aren't just sitting on their laurels. It's, okay, we won the Autumn War. What's the next campaign? Let's try the guys again, but this time we're the experts.
It's the factory at work. Shut down one production line, start up a new one.
I want to zoom out a bit and look at the lists in the source as a kind of historical map. We touched on their platform, loyalty to PlayStation, but there's a weird little blip in the timeline, the Xbox 360.
Ah, yes. The great Xbox 360 anomaly.
If you look at the dates between, say, 2006 to 2010, you see Spectral Force 3, Innocent Rage, Absolute, Blazing Infinity, Diario, Rebirth, Moon Legend, all on Xbox 360.
This was a very, very specific moment in gaming history. Microsoft was trying desperately to break into the Japanese market with the 360. They knew that to win over Japan, they needed Japanese RPGs. So they actively courted Japanese developers. They likely offered financial incentives, marketing support, easier development tools, whatever it took to get games on the 360.
And a smaller company like Idea Factory jumped on board.
They did. For a few years, if you wanted to play the newest Idea Factory Grand Strategy RPG, you had to own an Xbox 360. It was a strange time. It didn't last long. The Xbox never really took off in Japan in a big way, but the list captures that effort perfectly.
It's like a fossil record. You can see the sediment layer in their history where the Xbox happens.
It also shows their pragmatism. You know, if Microsoft is offering support and money to develop for their console, why not take it?
And then, if you look at the modern era in the source, say 2017 and beyond, you see the shift back. A lot of PS4 games, but also Windows, PC.
Yes. Seeing a game like Cyber Dimension Neptunia, 4 goddesses online hitting Windows is a huge deal.
Why is that so significant?
Because for the longest time, the vast majority of Japanese console developers just ignored the PC market. There was a perception that PC gaming is for work or for weird Western games like shooters, but the rise of Steam as a global distribution platform completely changed that.
And Idea Factory International, their U.S. branch, likely pushed really hard for this.
Absolutely. The Western audience games on PC, a huge part of it does. By porting their back catalog and their new releases to Steam, they unlocked a massive new global audience that doesn't necessarily own a PlayStation. It was another brilliant, pragmatic move.
So we've tracked them from the post-Data East days of 1994 through the PlayStation strategy era, the Otomate revolution on handhelds, the meta-humor of Neptunia, all the way to the modern global PC era.
It really is quite a trajectory when you lay it all out like that.
So let's try and wrap this up. What is the big picture here? What is the story of Idea Factory?
I think Idea Factory is a chameleon. That is the best word to describe them. They change their colors to suit their environment to survive.
They started with those gritty, super serious strategy games, Spectral Force.
Then they pivoted to completely dominate the romance genre for women with otome, changing their entire company culture in the process.
Then they partnered with other studios to make these self-aware meta-commentary RPGs like Neptunia.
And finally, they established a beachhead in the US to sell their very, very Japanese games directly to fans all over the world.
The takeaway for me, I think, is that they prove you don't need to be making Call of Duty or Mario to succeed. You don't need to be the biggest company in the world with the biggest marketing budget.
No, you just need to find your audience, however small, and serve them faithfully. Whether that audience wants to manage a fantasy kingdom for 100 hours, fight with anime consoles, or date a tragic member of the Shinsengumi.
If you feed the niche will feed you.
Precisely. They have survived by being indispensable to small, passionate groups of people, rather than being kind of liked by everyone and truly loved by no one.
All right, so here's a final thought to leave you with. We mentioned that 2022 announcement of Altergear, their return to male-targeted visual novels. Now, Idea Factory has spent the last decade and a half mastering the art of romance games for a female audience. They know exactly what makes a heart flutter, what pacing works, what makes a story sticky for that audience.
Indeed, they have refined that formula down to an absolute science through dozens and dozens of games.
So my question is this. Will that experience change how they make games for men? Will we see male-oriented visual novels from them that have the kind of emotional depth and character complexity of a top-tier Otome game? Or will they just go back to the old, tired tropes we often see in that genre?
That is a really provocative question. Usually those two genres, autumn games and male-targeted visual novels, are kept very separate. The design philosophies, the writing styles, they're often completely different, but if they can cross-pollinate, if they can bring that emotional intelligence they learned from Otomate over to Altergear, that could be something really special.
They could end up reinventing the genre all over again, just like they did back in 2008.
I guess we'll just have to wait and see what rolls off the factory line next.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the weird, wonderful, and ever-changing world of Idea Factory.
It was a pleasure.
See you in the next deep dive.